Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The next one is a pro-revenge story. My name's John, and I've always considered myself a pretty straight-laced guy. I'm what you might call a stickler for rules and doing things the proper way, which is probably why I got so frustrated dealing with Karen down at the job center. See, I used to get a small veteran's disability pension from back home for a hearing problem I picked up during my army days. It wasn't much, but when I moved to the UK, it got transferred over and paid out by the Department of Work and Pensions. Anyway, fast forward a few years and I've developed some new health problems that meant I needed to file for a disability allowance, diabetes being one of them, though at first I was trying to control it through diet alone. So I head down to the job center for my assessment interview, and that's when I met Karen. Right off the bat, I could tell Karen was one of those bureaucratic types who relishes any tiny bit of power they have over people, the kind who follows every rule to the letter but doesn't have an ounce of common sense or discretion. She starts interrogating me about why I didn't declare my veteran's pension as income. I point out it's listed elsewhere on the form, but she's already moved on to the next issue. She sees I'm not taking any diabetes medication and declares there's no way I can be diabetic then. I try explaining that I'm managing it through diet, but Karen's mind is made up. Just like that, she denies my claim, saying I'm lying about having diabetes. She even puts that as the official reason in her rejection letter. On top of that, she decides they'll stop paying my veteran's pension too. Well, that lights a fire under me. I send a copy of the letter to the High Commission and my doctor. Both of them are outraged at Karen's idiocy. The High Commission says they'll deal with it. Meanwhile, my doctor writes a complaint to the DWP questioning Karen's lack of medical qualifications. So after all this, I get a call that Karen wants me to come in for another interview to reconsider my claim. She specifies it has to be 1 p.m. on a certain day. I warn them I have an important medical appointment that morning and might run a bit late. Karen's response: if I'm not there exactly at 1 p.m., my claim will be denied, no exceptions. Now my blood's really boiling. But I decide I'm not going to let Karen trip me up again. I confirm I'll do my best to be there at 1 p.m. The day comes and I head to my doctor's appointment first thing in the morning. It takes a little longer than expected, of course, so I race over to the job center afterwards. I arrive right at 1 p.m. on the dot, feeling pretty pleased with myself. That is, until I see Karen has scheduled us to meet on the first floor, with no lift in sight. 15 painful minutes later, I've hobbled my way up the stairs as quick as my lungs can take it. A man in a suit has to help me the last few steps. I get in the meeting room and Karen is incensed. "You're late," she snaps. "Unless you have an amazing excuse, I'm denying your claim right now." I explain about my doctor's appointment running late, but Karen demands to know exactly what kept me. Figuring I have nothing left to lose, I decide to have a little fun with her. "Well, I took my clothes off so two nice young ladies could lube up my manhood," I say nonchalantly. "Then they did some very interesting things to my meat and two veg. After that, I laid on my side and one of the ladies stuck her fingers right up my—" "How dare you speak to me that way?" Karen gasps, her face turning bright red. "That's it! Your case is closed." Just then, the man in the suit steps forward from where he'd been listening in the hall. "Excuse me, Karen," he says sharply, "but you did ask him to explain what kept him from being on time. He seems to have answered honestly." The man turns to me. "So how did your prostate exam go then?" "More tests, unfortunately," I sigh, playing along. He nods. "And I take it that was the reason for your delay?" "No, sir," I say. "The real reason is this daft cow interviewed me on the first floor when she knows I've got lung issues and can't do stairs." The suited man thinks for a moment and turns back to Karen. "I believe this gentleman is absolutely right. You intentionally made things difficult for him. Consider his disability claim approved. And you and your manager will report to my office first thing tomorrow morning to explain your reprehensible behavior. If you're 1 minute late, you're fired. Understood?" Karen turns white as a sheet. "Yes, sir," she stammers. After she hurries out, the man introduces himself as an area director sent to investigate complaints about the job center. As it turns out, a complaint from a foreign high commission is a very serious matter that he intends to handle personally. Who knew? In the end, I got Karen off my back and my disability payments approved. And I learned that sometimes thinking a bit creatively can help you outsmart even the most infuriating bureaucratic nightmares. The first one is an entitled People Story. I had just inherited a nice little cabin up in the mountains from my late uncle. It was a cozy place with a beautiful view of the valley below. My uncle loved that cabin and spent every summer there fishing, hiking, and enjoying nature. I have fond childhood memories of visiting him and playing in those mountains, so inheriting the cabin was very special to me. After dealing with lawyers, paperwork, and cleaning the place up, I finally had a free weekend to drive up and stay in the cabin for the first time as the new owner. I was excited to relax, do some fishing, and make new memories in this place. I arrived on a sunny Saturday morning and took in the fresh mountain air and sweeping views. It was perfect. After unloading my bags, I decided to take a quick hike on one of my uncle's favorite trails that led to a secluded lake. About a mile into the hike, I was stopped by an angry-looking woman. She marched up to me and demanded to know what I was doing on her property. I was taken aback and explained that I had just inherited this land and cabin. She accused me of lying and said she was friends with the previous owner who would never leave the place to a shady character like me. I tried to politely explain that I was the new legal owner, and even offered to show her the paperwork and deed with my name on it. But she was having none of it. She claimed I had forged documents and was trying to steal her dear friend's property. I assured her that I meant no harm and was simply trying to enjoy my uncle's cabin, but she grew increasingly agitated. She threatened to call the police and report me for trespassing. I implored her to please not do that, as I was the lawful owner. But before I could pull out my documents, she angrily whipped out her phone and called cops, accusing me of being a dangerous trespasser. I could hear her loudly spewing false accusations, saying I had threatened her and that she feared for her safety. This woman who I'd never met in my life was outright lying to the cops about me. Part of me wanted to just walk away, but I knew I had to stay and clear my name or risk being arrested over her malicious lies. 15 agonizing minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up the dirt road and 2 uniformed officers got out. The woman, who I now realized must be one of the few neighbors, ran over to them pointing at me and raving like a lunatic. She claimed I was stalking her and that I broke into the cabin to squat there illegally. The officers approached me cautiously with their hands on their belts. I quickly explained I was the new owner and that this unhinged woman was falsely accusing me of trespassing. Thankfully, I had all my paperwork and ID on me to prove I was the legal owner. The officers examined the deed paperwork and apologized for the confusion and inconvenience this caused me. They politely asked the woman to keep her distance from me and my property in the future. They warned her that false police reports could land her in legal trouble. The woman stood there steaming with anger that I was not, in fact, an unlawful squatter. She spat some choice insults my way, then stormed off. What an awful first introduction to one of my new neighbors. I thanked the officers profusely for responding, and for recognizing that I was telling the truth. They wished me well, and said to call if I had any more issues with the difficult neighbor. I hoped I could avoid her from now on. The rest of the weekend went smoothly until I returned home. A few days later, I received paperwork that I was being sued by this unhinged woman. She was claiming I caused her emotional distress by trespassing and threatening her. These were complete and utter lies. I immediately called my lawyer, who helped me draft an official response with evidence that proved I owned the property. He also submitted police reports showing the woman filed a false report against me. We had an ironclad case, but the woman refused to back down. At trial, her outrageous lies became more absurd and contradictory under cross-examination. The judge saw right through her act and ruled fully in my favor. Victory was sweet, but my legal fees were piling up, having to defend myself against this harassment. My lawyer recommended I file a civil suit against the woman for monetary damages. He was confident we could win given the clear paper trail exposing her deceitful actions. So we sued for intentional infliction of emotional distress, slander, and filing a false police report. I'll spare you all the tedious legal proceedings. We won handily, of course. A judge ordered the woman to pay me $25,000 to cover my legal costs, and as punishment for all the anguish she caused me. Justice was served at last. The woman ended up with a criminal record for falsifying a police report. She was forced to pay up for her lies and disturbance. Her reputation was also ruined in our small mountain town. As for me, I can finally enjoy my uncle's beloved cabin in peace. The view is as stunning as ever, and I look forward to making lasting memories here. This place represents family, nature, and truth. Everything that awful woman tried to tarnish with her deceit. Her hatred failed miserably in the face of legal facts and human decency. I may occasionally see her around town, but she keeps her head down in shame, knowing she got exactly what she deserved. Let my trials and tribulations be a lesson. Always stand up for truth and justice will prevail. The law and goodness are on the side of innocent folks who do right, not scheming saboteurs like that contemptible Karen of a neighbor. Her sound defeat brings a satisfied smile to my face each time I enter my cherished cabin. The next one is a petty revenge story. On a day I was off work, I was craving a sandwich at lunchtime on a hot day. I traveled to the nearest subway and got in line. As it was noontime, there were quite a few people in line, and as many places, they seemed understaffed. I get this, everyone is nothing the store can do but what they can. The young teenage girl was the only one to make sandwiches, while a manager was ringing up the orders when not helping with condiments. So while waiting in line at Subway with like 6 others, I was behind a group of 3 old ladies, the Karens of this story. While not the spitting image of most Karens, you could tell from how they talked with each other, they were the kind of women with resting idiot faces. So it came time to have their sandwiches made, and of course, every one of them wanted a very custom sandwich. This meat, that cheese is a little too much. I want it toasted off. That is too much. I want to switch the bread. On and on, it was annoying as the one girl tried to keep up, but was getting frustrated and stressed. Then the manager stepped over, trying to help, but with these women, they were not happy with anything. After 15 minutes of making each of these ladies its sandwiches, it finally came time to pay. Down to the register they went as my meatball sub was quickly made and passed down. I am plain bread, meat, and sauce, a little ranch. So I waited behind them. The manager rang up the old bats, and when the total came out to around $30-ish, they went off again. I'm not saying that they started to squeal. We waited forever to be served. And then you two couldn't even make a sandwich. We want it free, they whined. I was fed up with it, and after it continued for a few minutes, I stepped up and said I'd take the sandwiches and add them to mine. The old crows grinned and thought they had one. I paid for the 4 sandwiches now and added my drink and chips. After my card was approved and I was handed my receipt, I picked up my newly 4-bought sandwiches and got my drink. As I started paying, the old ladies went to sit at a table. After getting my drink, I headed to the door to leave with my food in hand. Excuse me, you have our food still? Are you not going to bring it to us? Receipt in hand, holding it up. Nope, I paid my money for my food and will take them back to work. As I headed to the door, this got the old idiots to get up and chase me out the door, which I didn't mind. The staff had enough of them, and I can take some abuse from crazies. You need to give us our food, or we will call the cops and have you arrested. I knew this was dumb, but as I said, nothing better on a day off. Please be my guest. I assure you they won't be doing anything about this. One of them started to pull out a phone and call while the others began telling me how I must love stealing from old ladies and how they knew this person or that person, and I would be in jail for a long time. Well, they called. I stood there not saying a word, which is hard to do being belittled, but I had the store crowd watching by this point. Soon enough, a few units pulled in, and as they got out, a look of confusion crossed their face. OFC, are you the guy they called about because you match the description? Me. Yeah, I am what they call in on me. OFC, you stole their sandwiches and demanded money from them. Me. Well, look into it. Ask the clerk and manager who paid for the sandwiches and look at this receipt. One officer walked in, spoke with the store, and watched the video while the other listened to these women insinuate that I took the food from them. The shock was priceless once the other came out and confirmed I paid for them, and the store also wanted the 3 trespassed for a disturbance. I was released to leave, but decided to go back in and eat. The 3 were banned and left with an even more sour look, and the manager brought over a cookie, telling me it was on her. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I have a friend who works for digital agencies doing analytics for Fortune 500 core. Let's call him Dan, and usually those agencies don't do much more than proxying the contractor and surcharging a percentage on every hour. They actually rarely contribute anything to the work process or end product. They sometimes wouldn't even have a PM account manager involved. They would just literally resell the contractor. And usually those agencies are smart enough to shut the heck up and not bother the client or the contractor. They know that they actually have no reasonable justification for the surcharge. Well, in this case, Dan's agency, I think it was Cardinal Path at the time, suddenly started asking for more detailed timesheets. You see, more senior contractors usually won't bother. They would have some generic one-liner like, worked, and 8 HRS charged towards that, because it's not really worth it to go and detail everything. The client would know what work the contractor would have done anyhow, so they would approve the timesheets if they don't exceed the weekly limit, which is 40 hours usually. My friend, of course, pushed back and asked the client whether they needed that level of detail. The client had no problems with the timesheets whatsoever, and when he raised it with the agency's manager, they informed him that it was a new corporate policy or something to that extent. Well, Dan had to comply, and he started charging the agency for it. He started adding time expenses unrelated to the client work, stuff the agency casually got used to getting for free. Two-factor authentications, trashy corporate mass emails, any kind of correspondence with the agency staff like accountants, account managers, PMs, IT. Useless recurring learning courses, etc., etc., and of course, the time wasted on timesheets. In total, it would have effectively been anywhere from 4 to 8 hours a week. He got himself almost one whole paid day off effectively. He told the client that his capacity on Fridays would have been lessened due to the new rules the agency pushed, so he blocked the whole day to avoid any meetings. That would effectively leave his whole Friday to himself. The client actually kind of liked it because Fridays were half days off normally for their regular staff, plus no production releases were allowed on Fridays anyhow. But they couldn't enforce the half days on contractors. And basically what it meant to the client is that they would have to pay less to the agency for Fridays. Now, not only the agency lost 8 hours a week of their profit, they now introduced an expense because those 8 hours they lost now suddenly became a liability that they had to pay for, because these hours were billable, of course. Dan's hour back then was over $100, but let's just pretend it was $100 per hour. The agency likely charged at least double, so $200/H, so the net difference would have been $100 for 6 hours, $600 from their net revenue, plus $100 for 6 hours that they would have to now to pay out of their own pocket. $1,200/week. Not bad. Seems a reasonable cost for a more detailed timesheet, eh? They freaked out. There was a lot of back and forth. In the end, what? You think they removed the requirement? You haven't worked much for bureaucracies, eh? No, they just went with it, lulz. My dear friend worked there for another year, effectively having Fridays off, and then left the agency when they started pushing new corporate contracts onto the contractors. And the new contracts were kinda unreasonable. Asked for some odd things, one of which would be to fill the timesheets immediately after a given task was completed. He pushed back, but the director at the agency claimed they couldn't change anything in the contracts since these new contracts were coming from Dentsu, the parent agency that would have apparently acquired Cardinal Path around that time. The next one is an entitled People Story. So this isn't my story, but from one of my friends. This happened a long ago, and names, some details have been changed to protect the innocent. My friend, who I'll call Lucy, lives in a town with a pretty good-sized army base. To make some money between semesters of college, Lucy took a summer job as a waitress at a local restaurant that is popular with the officers and their families. Lucy is liked as a waitress to the point that patrons will ask to be seated in her section. But you're not here for that story, are you? You're here for the entitled people. And oh boy, did Karen not disappoint. It was a Friday evening, so it was packed. There's at least an hour wait, the kitchen is zipping, and Lucy and her co-workers are on their toes. Fortunately, it's mostly regulars, so they're patient and even leaving nice tips and paying compliments to the waitstaff owner. Enter Karen. Karen, who Lucy had never seen before, was seated in Lucy's section and begins the usual Karen tirades, complaining about the wait, sending her pasta dish back a total of 3 times because it wasn't cooked just right, husband's rank name dropping, yada yada yada. Lucy, easily the most patient and kind-hearted person I've ever met, but even she was getting frustrated. Then the bombshell dropped. Like most places in this town, the restaurant offers a military discount. However, thanks to this being abused in the past, people wanting the military discount must show their military ID in order to qualify. There's signs posted on the doors and in the menu stating this. Most patrons are understanding of this. But as you can guess, Karen is not one of those people. It's time for the check, and Karen asks for the military discount. Lucy, polite as ever, asks for Karen's military ID. Karen, what did you say? Lucy, can you please present your military ID for the discount? Karen, don't you know who I am, Lucy? I'm sorry, ma'am, but company rules state that your ID must be shown to get the discount. Karen, are you calling me a liar? Lucy, no, ma'am, but in order to qualify for the discount, you must show your military ID. Karen, my husband is Kyle, married to a Woodward. He's a second aleti at the army base, and he knows people. Lucy is trying to keep her cool, but she told me that she wanted to cry. Karen, I know people. I can make sure you never get a job in this town again. You're so stupid. You're probably some college dropout who will never amount to nothing. By this point, everyone is silent, and even the owner is coming over. An older woman from another section, who Lucy has never seen before either, gets up and comes over. The woman, who I'll call Belle, taps Karen on the shoulder. Karen stops her tirade, whips around, her face turning 50 shades of red and purple, stares Belle down. Karen, what do you want? Belle, calm. You're going to apologize to this young lady, pay in full and leave a generous tip. Karen, who the frick are you? Belle, someone who can make things very difficult for your husband. Karen, I don't have to stand for this. Grabs her purse. I'll tell so many people just how much this place sucks that nobody will want to come here anymore. Karen storms off, pushing the owner hard enough for him to fall to the ground and left. According to Lucy, it was so silent that you can hear a pin drop for at least a minute. Belle helps the owner to his feet, makes sure he's okay, then turns to Lucy. Belle, are you okay? Lucy, still shaken. Thank you, I'm okay. Belle, I'd like to apologize on behalf of the base. That was completely uncalled for. Turns to owner. I'd also like to compensate for the meal and tip as an apology. Owner. There's no need, ma'am. Belle, I insist. Owner, thank you, ma'am. Belle returned to her seat and the night continued. Belle and her husband came by to check on Lucy before leaving and promised to come back for dinner the next Friday. It wasn't until Monday afternoon when Kyle went to the restaurant to apologize that Lucy learned what went down. It turned out that Belle was the major general who had just been posted to the base. That morning, Belle had him summoned to her office for a little chat. Because it happened off base, he was mortified and offered to reimburse Belle for the check tip. He didn't get into trouble. However, he was warned that Karen's behavior could make things difficult for his career. He made sure Karen a verbal got torn up one side and down the other on the phone when he was done. In this town, gossip spreads faster than the flu. Karen never darkened the door of the restaurant again, but the rest of the town made sure Karen knew she wasn't welcome. Belle kept her word and showed up every Friday evening for dinner with her husband. According to Lucy, she was a classy lady, and even if she didn't sit in Lucy's section, she'd make sure to tell Lucy hello and leave her a nice tip. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.